The internet talks a lot about things that don't matter. This ties back to what we were talking about the other day, and why not? I'll talk about it again. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick, and I talked yesterday. Well, I talked about it yesterday. I don't know if you saw it or when you saw that podcast, but you'll see a link to it at the end of this video right next to that nice subscribe button, which you should do. You should subscribe to me because I'm very, very interesting. I'm sure you heard all that noise. I talked yesterday about the internet being a fire hose of information straight to your dome piece. And I touched on it, but I wanted to go into it a little bit deeper. The internet is a fire hose of information, particularly about dating, masculinity, femininity, whatever. Now, there's an Instagram account, that guy Gary, does an excellent job in about 2 minutes of talking about the problem with the label of toxic masculinity. He goes deep into that, and he does a really nice job with it. British gentleman, very, very proper, and he's a proper, as my friend over in England would say, he's a proper lad. He's a proper lad. But he dives into the fact that this phrase toxic masculinity is, at best, it's misleading. Because what it does is it labels everything masculine with the label toxic. It doesn't differentiate. It doesn't say non-toxic masculinity. It just says there's toxic masculinity. Now, some people have countered and said, well, there's also toxic femininity, but we don't really use that that's not really out there in the internet. Toxic masculinity is sort of this assumption that it is all men, but for some that have some higher angels, or some that are in touch with their feminine, thus making the feminine really the savior of the masculine. And in truth, that's probably the correct way to look at it. The masculine needs the feminine as much as the feminine needs the masculine. Ooh, Nick, you went there. But the more popular discourse by far is the toxic masculinity, and it comes under a bunch of different guises. For example, would you rather be in the woods with a man or a bear? That came up. It's a past trend, but it came up, and the number of women who said, I'll take the bear, is staggering. Whether or not it was a majority or a plurality, which is a large minority, doesn't matter, because it was a staggering number of women who defaulted to the bear. Now, most of these women would have male friends, and they would say to that man, oh, he's so sweet. Jordan Peterson talks about how all the traits that many people see in men as positive traits, those traits don't really exist without the flip side of that trait. The example of that I would use is that, well, that man is so gentle. Gentleness sort of requires its inverse, the not so gentle. If you're not strong but know how to control it, you're not gentle, you're just weak. And it's not a knock. It's just, it might be true. You're not physically gentle if you don't have the ability to be physically strong, because most positive traits come from the learning of how to control sort of a bad trait. Confidence is ego paired with humility. I'm absolutely confident in my ability to do this because I've been humbled as I do it. You know, LeBron James walks on the basketball court. He's an egomaniac when he walks on the basketball court. The man can make a shot from anywhere on the court, but guess what? It's because he's missed shots from everywhere on the court. And then he's gotten his butt up and he's tried again. He's allowed to have that unbridled confidence in himself because he's also been humiliated. He knows what he can do because he's tried to do more and he's been brought back to here. The internet, as this fire hose of information, would have you believe that no, confidence, gentleness, these are things that only exist in men if we pull the masculine out of the men. If we could just scrape that little layer away, then we'd have all the positive traits in men that we desire. Well, no. Men don't need to have the man scraped out of them. Men need to be taught what being a man actually looks like. How does that relate to the dating scene, because I now try to relate everything to the dating scene. Well, and again, to any LGBTQIA+, which I think is the current acronym, listeners, I am glad you're here. You are more than welcome to listen in on the show. I'm speaking a lot more to the straight experience just because it's the experience I know. I'm speaking to what I know. And a lot of times I'm speaking from the straight male perspective, the straight white male perspective. I'm half Lebanese, but nobody really gives a shit about that. So if I'm not speaking directly to you, I hope you enjoy it anyway, but I apologize. When we come into the dating arena, we see this in a lot of the anecdotal evidence. Now, I can't say there's been a rigorous scientific study done to prove it, but we see it in a lot of the anecdotal evidence. Women want a guy who sort of exudes all the masculine traits, but they have this sort of veneer of not masculine on top. You want, well, and again, anecdotal, ladies. I'm not in your heads. You can feel free to disagree with me. What I've seen is women want the big, strong man in some shape or form. That doesn't mean he's got a six-pack. Doesn't mean he's got massive, broad shoulders. That it's just strength in some way. The guy who can hold you. The guy who can do X, Y, or Z. And you want the guy who's going to kind of, let you win the play fight. Not tell you how strong he is. Well, he can't do that unless he's strong. It's like when you play fight with a kid. The kid, you let the kid win a lot. Not because you're some, not because you're a weirdo. It's just because, it's how kids learn to play safe. It's how kids learn to know what's fun and what's not. They have to punch something stronger than themselves and be told, hey, we don't do that. But essentially, they get to do that with no consequence. In the dating arena, it's, I don't know how often you play fight your girl, but women want that, as far as I can tell, or at least the women that I've come across have wanted that. And it's an inherently masculine trait to be strong, and then it's a gentlemanly trait to restrain it. Restraint, though, as Jordan Peterson says, implies that you're restraining something. If you have restraint, but there's nothing to restrain, but then you're just weak. And weakness isn't a feminine trait. Don't get me wrong on that. If you take away all the masculine, you don't get a more feminine man, you just sort of get a nothing man. And the nothing man is the most dangerous of all the men because they'll cling to the first voice they hear that makes them feel good. And that's how we end up with all these chads on the dating scene who have spent their entire youth listening to that genius Andrew Tate, or taking guys like whoever his name is, Andrew, on the whatever podcast seriously. Like the man who has studied rigorously the sociological impact of men in the field. Like, come on. You don't have to work on an oil rig to be a big, strong man. You don't have to work in a sewer to be a big, strong man. No. But to be an actual man, you do have to actually challenge yourself and not just fall in line with what these sort of masculine demagogues talk about. I would say these fake masculine demagogues. That's the word. In the dating scene, if you are not masculine, you need to step back and look at the influences in your life. And if you can strip away some of those outside noises and replace them with better noises, you might find you have more success in dating because you might learn how to make yourself a better man. And if you are a better man, you will have a lot more success in dating. And what does a better man look like? Well, look at Andrew Tate. Do the opposite. And then there's some nuance to that because, you should work out and eat clean and all that good stuff. But anyways, hopefully that ramble made sense. We ramble here on the show. It's what we do. I'm out of time. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, subscribe, leave a nice comment. If you didn't like it, leave a mean comment. I'll respond. I got nothing better to do. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.